Good morning. Welcome to the Backyard Professor videos. I'm Kerry Schertz, the Backyard Professor. Some recent information has been put together conveniently in book form by the Neil A. Maxwell Institute. This is the best of the Maxwell Institute, and it is really good stuff. The Book of Mormon and DNA Research, where several different scholars, scientists, geneticists have been exploring this DNA issue in the Book of Mormon for the last several years anyway. They have a number of intriguing ideas that I want to share with you. One of the most interesting idea concerns languages, believe it or not. On page 48, 49, this was published by the Maxwell Institute, edited by Daniel C. Peterson, in 2008, this year. Brand new information. This idea on Hebrew in Mesoamerica, we hear constantly from critics that there is no Hebrew in Mesoamerica. Now, on the one hand, I have to wonder, do the critics, the anti-Mormon critics, know Hebrew, and do they know the Mesoamerican languages so that they can test it themselves? Or have they already come to the conclusion and therefore ignore all evidence to the contrary? That's my personal belief of what the vehement anti-Mormons are doing. I know there's non-Mormon scholars, and I know there's non-Mormons, and I know there are people who disagree with the Book of Mormon and Mormonism who are not virulent anti-Mormons and who appear to at least be willing to look into some of these things. And there are many areas where we just don't have fast, hard conclusions yet. But we've got some really strong hints of very viable and serious possibilities. And that's what I want to share with you now by none other than John L. Sorensen, the finest LDS Mesoamerican scholar. We have John E. Clark coming up now. Matthew Roper is a very good scholar of Mesoamerican antiquities. So there's some possibilities here from the LDS research that I believe just are not well enough known. The interesting thing is, as I've told you, we have a lot of LDS scholars looking into myriads of subjects, but not giving any credibility. And I think that's a shame, because the LDS scholars are finding through the scholarship some interesting situations that I think need to be better known. It's not just Mormon scholars that the Mormon scholars are quoting either. This is what makes it so interesting. We are willing to look past our own noses and our own research. You know, we've been accused of having scholarly inbreeding, where all we do is quote each other all the time, and therefore what we have is nothing more or less than circular reasoning, and so on and so forth. Not even close. Sorry, wrong answer. Page 48. Latter-day Saint students of the Book of Mormon should understand that long before Lehi's day, before 600 BC, Mesoamerica was already linguistically complex. There were people here. That's just the nature of the game. The evidence shows that, and the Book of Mormon certainly allows that. Moreover, many archaeological sites were occupied continuously, or so it appears, for thousands of years without clear evidence in the material remains of any replacement of the culture of the inhabitants. That continuity suggests, although it does not prove, that many of those people probably did not change their tongues. We understand that. I mean, criminy, they found, well, at a minimum, 35 different languages here in Mesoamerica. So we have to take that into consideration. On page 49, all this means is that the old supposition by some Latter-day Saints that the Hebrew tongue used by Lehi and Mulek's immigrant parties became foundational for all ancient American languages is impossible. That perhaps was one of the earlier interpretations of our understanding when we did not have the vast amounts of information on Mesoamerica that we have now, but that's an old idea and it's out of date. So we need to update ourselves. We Mormons need to update ourselves too. That's my constant theme in these videos. Constantly. And if I haven't shown you by now through the few dozen books that I utilize so far, maybe I've used about 100 in my videos, then you're just not going to get the point. We need to remain open and flexible, just exactly like the worldly scholars need to be open and flexible, because we're just not done. There is so much more coming out now, and I'm trying to get you into that mindset. For one thing, I'm spending hundreds, if not thousands of dollars on new information all the time because it's updating. If we were done, if all of our ideas about the Book of Mormon were accurate and true and verified and all that, then who would be doing any research? As it is, vast amounts of new research are coming up, and it is compelling. It is not wasted time, and it is not wasted money. What we're finding has very exciting and interesting implications for the Book of Mormon record. So this is why I bring this material out for you. And this is why it's so important to understand what the Book of Mormon itself says. You know, I heard a statistic a couple years ago that we have a 95% membership in the church who has not read the Book of Mormon completely through yet. That's a travesty. We need to improve those percentages. We need to first understand the Book of Mormon on its own terms if we're going to learn anything, right? My challenge to you is take the time to read the record. When we understand, as Sorensen says, when we examine the social and the cultural implications of what the Book of Mormon record tells us, we discover that it cannot possibly be a history of the American Indians. Mormon's book was never meant to serve as a history of an entire territory. But what it is it's called a lineage history. It relates certain events and interpretations of those events that relate to a fairly small number of people, chiefly the descendants of Nephi. The record keepers themselves kept the records among themselves and taught their own people. We need to understand that. These serve the same purposes as most of the historical books of the Bible, like Genesis and Exodus. Those records focus on the stories about Abraham and those of his descendants who became the founders of the house of Israel. For example, in the Old Testament, sources only briefly mention Ishmael and his clan, let alone more distant ethnic entities like the Canaanites, and then only as far as the events involving those outsiders impinged on the key descent line. It's the same thing with our Book of Mormon. In short, a lineage history is a partial record of historical events emphasizing what happened to one group of people. Phrased in the record's ethnocentric terms themselves, the lineage histories of other groups on the scene, if they were kept, they would report different versions of what was going on. So, knowing that the Nephite record is of this limited sort, we can appreciate why, for example, their story gives a total of only 100 or so words to the people of Zarahemla, although that group was much more numerous than ethnic Nephites were. When you read in that record, see Mosiah 25:1, you'll see that. Such narrowly told accounts were a common form of, quote, history, unquote, in many parts of the ancient world, including, as we could expect, among the native peoples of Mesoamerica. So even their records of the Mesoamerican peoples, what little remain that we have, are specifically talking about certain people, not the whole history of the continent. The upshot is that we need to think of the Nephite record keepers as a minority, an elite minority at that, who, like most ruling minorities, tended to have their speeches and their customs eventually smothered by the speech and the lifeways of the majority population. think of